All right, guys. I promised one of my students at the weekend we did a lesson all on endgame theory, and it seems like so many beginners and improving players are very, very weak on endgame theory. So what I thought we'd do is I'm going to use Lichess for this video, and specifically Lichess practice. So this is like a trainer where it allows you just to play against the computer with preset situations. So you go to lichess.org/practice. You don't even have to be a member. You don't have to log in. It's free anyway. So, and what we're going to do is we're going to go down here to pawn endgames and key squares. Okay. Now the idea of key squares is these are squares. If your king can get itself to one of those squares, then it can protect your pawn. All right. So here, these, and they are the squares 2 in front of your pawn and also one to either side. All right. Now, so I'm going to put my king on here, and my opponent is going to there. Okay. Now, there's a couple of really, really key patterns that you need to remember in order to help get your pawn to the line. It stings like hell if you have this situation where you've got time on the clock, you've got a pawn, your opponent doesn't have a pawn, it should be a one game, and you end up either stalemating or losing your pawn. And that really just hurts. Okay, so important principle to remember is the idea of opposition. So that's when you've got a king and, well, both kings are facing off against each other. They're in line, so they're not diagonal as such, right? But they're in line, either vertically or horizontally. Okay. Now the player who gets the opposition, i.e., who steps into that that pattern, like here, all right, means that it's because it's your opponent's turn. If it was black's turn there and he was on here, right, he couldn't he couldn't make progress towards my king. He can only move from there sideways or backwards. Okay, like that. So now he's moved to here, and there's another key thing. Now it would be tempting now to move the pawn up, but if I move the pawn up, what can my opponent do? My opponent can get opposition by moving here, and then my king has to move to the side, and I haven't achieved anything that way. Okay, so the second pattern that you need to remember is to place your king a knight's move away from your opponent's king, okay, across the line of the pawn. So now I go here, all right, king's moved back to here. What's the move now? Right, with king there, we have to occupy this square. Opposition. Okay. Now, if I wish, I can just move my pawn up. Right. King's moved to here. Now, on the next turn, he could go there, couldn't he, and get opposition. So I'm going to move there. Right. And now I can move my pawn up. And again, I can move my king up here. And now there's nothing black can do to prevent my pawn from getting there. He's too far away. My king is covering these squares, and the pawn can go to this square on the next move. Okay, so very quick, get a queen, and we're done. All right, so now when you're starting with your pawn on the third rank, same principle. I want to get to one of these squares. So I'm thinking, where's my opponent coming? If he comes here, here. So I'm going to go there to start. Okay, so I want to prevent him from stepping into the opposition pattern. Right, so now if I go here, you see, if I were to go here, he can go there. Now he's got the opposition, so we don't want that. I'm going to go there. Now he can step into opposition if we go like that, so I get the opposition. Now I go for the knight one, right, remember? And this pawn's quite safe. This pawn can go here, the king can't approach. Now he's got the knight move away, but what do we do? Right, I can move my pawn up now because he can't get opposition there. Okay, now I take the opposition. Now I go knight move across the line of the pawn, and now the pawn can skip through and promote to queen. Okay, you got it? Same again. I want to prevent my opponent from getting the opposition because that gives him the initiative. So, I mean, if I go straight here, my pawn's got 1, 2, 3 squares already there. I think that should be fine. Okay, so he's got the knight's move now, so I move the pawn up. Opposition, knight's move, pawn, off he goes. You see? So it's just those two arrangements of kings. That's all you have to know, right? Now we're on the 5th rank, and now it's slightly different. Okay, now I can't go here because he goes there and gets opposition. I can go here. That seems fine. Okay, let's go there. Right, now I take the opposition. Now I take the knight's move. Bong, bong, boom. Done. Okay, pawn on the 6th rank. Now things get more interesting. Okay, there's only one good move here. So, let's think. I go here. Not allowed. So that one's not on. Okay, obviously I can't go anywhere else. Obviously I can't put my king there. Now if I move my king away, he comes here with opposition and my pawn falls. So there's only one move, and that is push the pawn. Very simple. Now the king comes here, pawn goes there, queen, and we are away. Okay, so now on this next one is interesting because this is an exception. Now clearly the danger here is you push the pawn and the pawn covers that square, the king's covering that square, you've got yourself stalemate. You cannot have that. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to go king to the end now, and then we bring the king back. Okay. Again, pawn there would be stalemate. If I go here, he goes there, I can't go there now. Let's go back one. Right, now it's saying it's drawing. Push, no. Got that one wrong. Okay, let's retry that one. Okay, king to here. I can't push my pawn. If he gets to go there, he takes my pawn, so I have to retreat. Okay, now this is what we should do, okay? What we have to do is we have to get this kind of situation. In fact, yeah, right. I want to push my pawn through, and it is actually protected by my king, but I have to do it without stalemating black, so I have to come here, right? And now here, and now here. And now the pawn can dance through, so you have to cross over to the other side. There you go, that's it. And this one, we have the opposition, right, and it's white to move. So, I can't move forwards. Black's king can only go there or there. So, let's think. If I go here, that I think is the key. When you've got the pawns on the B file or the G file, I think you need to have your king on the outside. So move my king to there, and what's the next move? Yeah, it seems like you're undefending this pawn, but that's okay, because he can't move to here because the pawn is guarding it, and now the pawn dances through. Okay, there we go. Pawn on the 7th rank, pretty straightforward. I can move to either of these two squares and promote. There we go. Okay, the rook's pawn. Fairly straightforward again. I just move forwards. Yeah, shepherd the pawn through. Rook pawn number 2. Now this is when the boot is on the other foot, right? But it's now you to play. So it's the exact same position, but now you are the other side. So you're trying to protect against this. Now, if it's you to move at this point, what you have to do is you have to get to one of these two key squares. So I'm going to move here. Stops the king from advancing, right? Now I move here and grab the pawn, and there we go. Okay. Now this is an interesting one. Any key square by any route. Okay. Now, I have to confess, I don't really understand why this one works the way it does. But I go here. So I'm trying to get to, remember, these 3 squares. But I'm also trying to avoid giving my opponent the chance to get the opposition. So he's got this thing called distant opposition. Okay, so now, where are we? Well, I might retry this one and explore it a little bit more as well, okay? So, if I go here, he's got that and he's got the opposition. If I go here, he doesn't. Okay, now I do. Now, knight's turn. Okay, now opposition. Now, I can't push the pawn forward because he has opposition, so I go knight's move. Okay, now the pawn is fine. Okay, now opposition. Knight's move, and there we go. All right, let's have another go at that one. Because if I go, for example, here, it says that's a blunder because it's now drawing. Okay, so why is it drawing? It's drawing because black can now go here. Okay, now what this is called is distant opposition. That means that black can go to here, right? If I go forwards, he comes forwards. And he's now on one of the key squares. So he can stop me from getting to the key squares. Very interesting stuff. Okay, here's one final position that's really, really crucial that came up in my lesson with Matt on the weekend. And I promised that I'd make this video for that. So for this one, I've come into chess.com analysis board. So you go learn analysis. Let's go setup. I'm going to clear the board, click the trash icon. And let's say you've got a white king. Your opponent has a pawn and a king that is behind the pawn. Right, the situations we've seen so far, you've always tried to get the king in front of the pawn. In that case, it can allow the pawn through, it can protect the squares and guide the pawn through. Now, if you've got a situation, say, where there's just one pawn left on the board, the kings have made a dash to get to the pawn, black has got there in time to protect the pawn, but it's white to move. What do you do? And you need to know this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click Finish versus Computer, and we're going to play against Stockfish on the full fat setting. Okay, so white to move now, and I think this is something really worth training from both sides. Okay, so yeah, I mean, you can simply retreat. The best move is probably to go forwards. You want to avoid two things. Avoid giving your opponent the opposition. Okay, and the second thing, you must prevent the king from getting in front of the pawn. If the king gets in front of the pawn, you are gone. Yeah. Okay, so now we're in line. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move straight backwards. Okay, now the king has moved to here. That allows me to take the opposition, stops the king from getting in front of the pawn. Okay, pawn moves, not a problem. I'm going to move here. Okay, he's gone to there, move straight backwards. King goes here, I'll move forwards, not a problem. We can do this all day long, Stockfish. Yes, smelly old fish. You know, keep going forwards. Okay, so that's drawn by repetition. So let's go rematch. We're going to try it from the other side. So now I am the king with the pawn. Let's go here. Okay, now I go to the side of the pawn. I'm trying to get in front. He's not going to let me. Okay, I'll throw in a check. Okay, now I'm playing Stockfish, so this has to be a draw. Okay, forwards. Check. Check again. Now this is crucial. He has to go this way, right? When you get this close to the line, you have to go in front of the king. If he'd gone there, it would be curtains, because then I can go here and then the pawn promotes. Okay, so you have to go in front of the king. So now go there, and now it's absolutely drawn because I can't go here. Okay, if I go here, it's stalemate because the king's guarding those two squares and the pawn's guarding those two squares. The only other option is to step away to any of these 6 squares, 5 squares, and that's a draw as well because he captures the pawn. So the key thing to remember is this, right? When pawn goes there, right, here you have to go in front of the king. You can't go to the other side because that's simply losing, right? Let's just finish it off. So if I go here, you see stalemate. Okay, let's just drill it a couple more times. I really want you to do this. This is absolutely crucial. Okay, let's go forwards. Let's go backwards. Forwards. Backwards. I'm looking for this opposition all the time. Okay, opposition. There we go. Got it. Fine. Go there. Backwards. Opposition. Forwards again. You see? Get the opposition if you can, otherwise just move straight back. Opposition. La-di-da. Should be very straightforward. Should always be drawn. Okay. And now we move straight backwards. Okay, opposition again. Okay, now I come in front of the pawn. He's going to go there. Now I move backwards, and this key thing, right? Okay, so he's decided to retreat. I mean, Stockfish knows this is a draw whichever way it goes anyway, so he's gonna end up repeating now. Backwards. Now if king comes here, that's what I want him to do. Okay, it's gonna end up drawn. I can do this all day long, you see. Important thing, stay behind the pawn if you can. Otherwise, go for the opposition. So, yeah, that's it. Some absolutely crucial, very fundamental endgame patterns. King and pawn against king. You should never lose this game. But if this is the situation, it ought to be a draw unless your opponent screws up. Okay, that's it. Hope this has been useful for you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.